We are on chapter 7 tonight of Luke. The healed, the dead raised, and the sin forgiven. Give me just a second to get this up wherever it's at. Notifications, did we go? It'll come up in a minute. First verse. Now when he concluded, last week at chapter 6, we had the Sermon on the Plain. Matthew's version had Sermon on the Mount. This is a little different version of that, Sermon on the Plain. It was in a flat area, it told us, Luke told us. So now he's continued that. He's finished his pastoring or finished his preaching. And it says, now when he concluded all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Many times when he went through this, when people would gather, be great crowds. We know the crowds of at least 5,000 men, not counting the women. Another one was 4,000. So it could be thousands of people there. We don't know how many in each one of these cases when it doesn't tell us this. But here he left and went to Capernaum. Now Capernaum is around, if we remember, around the Sea of Galilee. It's pretty close. It's not it is pretty close right there to the sea, because that was the home of James and John and Peter and Andrew in their later lives. So that's where they did their fishing. So it's real close to them. So Jesus went there to Capernaum to kind of rest up. And a certain centurion's servant who was dear to him was sick and ready to die. So when he heard about Jesus, he sent the elders of the Jews to him, pleading with him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they begged him earnestly, saying that the one for whom he should do this was deserving, for he loves our nation and has built us a synagogue. So we, in this particular case, we see that not the first time, but this is another time where someone other than a Jew goes to Jesus. Matthew's story has a similar one to this. We don't know if they're the same or they're not, because some of the comments in the section that we read are a little different. So we're not real sure. It really doesn't matter. It could have been two different cases, or it may not have been at all. Just one case, And it's Matthew's interpretation versus Luke's interpretation. As a reminder, Matthew was an eyewitness. He was there. Luke wasn't an eyewitness. He was coming off of probably Peter's testimony and his what he remembered, also with Mary and some of the others. So Luke was a physician that gathered the information and put together his book that we call one of the Gospels. So this centurion, they had, immediately we think of Rome, and it could have been a Roman centurion. It could have also been from Rome, They had other citizens of the Roman army that weren't Romans. We know that because they drafted people, and whenever they conquered these countries, they basically enslaved them, said, you're going to be our troops now, and so that's what happened. So we don't know exactly if he was Roman or if he was surely not Jewish, because he wouldn't have been going with the Romans, helping the Romans out, you wouldn't have thought. But it tells us a couple of things. He had, and what is a centurion? What do we normally think of a centurion? It's a soldier, but he's over how many people? About 100. That's why they call centurion. He's over about 100 people. Could have been more or less. We don't know exactly. But he's one with authority. He's one of the leaders. We might call him a captain or something like that today. Yeah, major. He's not way up there, but he's enough that he's got people underneath him. going back and forth. And he had a relation with the Jewish people because tells us that he had built them a synagogue, okay, helped contribute to a synagogue, and that he loved their nation. We don't know exactly when he heard or when he found out about Jesus, but somehow he found out about Jesus. And he asked the Jewish leaders here, the elders, to come and ask Jesus if he would pray for his servant. He had a servant there. Now, normally servants, when they got sick, they bought them. I mean, the people would buy and sell people as slaves. We've talked about that before in Deuteronomy when we were reading about that. And the Romans, of course, had slaves too, to take care of their household, to do all that. And if they got too sick and they wouldn't get well, they'd just kill them and go buy another one. It's disposable. I mean, that's exactly what it was to them. They was somebody to use and use up. Well, by him wanting to save this servant, that tells you something. That tells you that he's gone a little bit beyond. He's heard Jesus. He's starting to change a little bit and starting to understand the message and the faith. Okay? We'll see that in just a minute here as we read the next scripture. Brother Epperson?
Then Jesus entered the field, and when he was already not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof. Therefore I did not even think myself worthy to come to you, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am commanded, placed under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it.
Okay. So Jesus heard this, and he heard from the elders. Okay. The centurion didn't come out to him. He said, the elders. Jesus heard that, and he was going towards the centurion's house. Okay. He was going to do what he asked, apparently. But the centurion, he even didn't go out. Okay, in Matthew's story, he went out to Jesus, which could have been what happened here too, but it said some people went out. He sent people out at first, and then he came himself later, met him outside. We don't know. Like I said, we don't know exactly for sure, but Jesus didn't hesitate. He went ahead and went with him. And the centurion, knowing that Jesus, as a word just left me, as a preacher, a rabbi, he wouldn't come into a non-Jewish house, a Gentile house, because it would make him unclean. So he knew that, so that's why he went out, or he told the servants to go out. You don't even have to come to my house. All you have to do is say the word, and he'll be healed. I know it will. And he said, I understand this, because he was a man that was under authority also, and he could send people out and do things, and they would do it. Because if they didn't do it, he'd beat the living tar out of them. No, that's usually what happened in the Roman army. But that's what he said. He said, for I am also a man placed under authority, having soldiers under me. Say to one, come, one go, and he does. Another come, and he comes. So Jesus, and if you say down here, here's the rabbinic writing. It's not really in the Bible, but the rabbis follow a writing. It's called Obalot, which is another book. They follow 18:7. The dwelling places of Gentiles are unclean. Okay, that's what the rabbis were teaching. So that's why he said, don't trouble yourself, basically, to go under my roof. You don't even have to go under my roof. So a couple things. The Jewish leadership, they thought well of him, okay, because they loved him, because he wasn't like the other Roman centurions and Roman soldiers, because they basically, as we understand it, treated the people like dirt, like dogs. He didn't. He treated them like people. He actually, evidently, by helping them build the synagogue, don't you think he probably went to the synagogue, or at least was outside the synagogue, listening, trying to understand, trying to serve the one true God? I kind of do. You know, I don't know if he was or not. I don't know if he'd be welcome, a Gentile would be welcome in there, but he built it, so I think they would kind of make arrangements for him somehow. Don't know. But let's see. Tammy, you want to read 9 through 10?
When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned around and said to the crowd to follow him, I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And those who were sent returned to the house from the servant well who had been sent.
Okay. There's only two other times. This is one of only two times where Jesus actually, what we understood, said he marveled at him. He was flabbergasted that this non-Jew had more faith than any of the other Jews he'd encountered so far. That was supposed to be following the law. Okay? It says here, he did so here at the faith of the centurion, and also at the unbelief of his own people in Mark 6:6. That's where he also was marveling, because at that time it was so negative. I don't know why I went there. Anyway, we'll go back. So he went ahead. He couldn't believe it. So he did it. He went back. The servants went back. And what happened? The servant was fine. He was healed. Just amazing. Jesus both answered the centurion's unselfish request and proved that he really did have the authority the centurion trusted him to have. That's sometimes what we're lacking. Oh, I know you can do it, Jesus. Yeah, you know you can. I can do it, but do you really think I can do it?
I love the part where it's showing most Jesus' humanity and his divinity, where it says, he marveled at him.
Mm-hmm.
And she the great fact.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did.
Yeah, he just, here it didn't even say he spoke. In the other one it did, okay? He said, go and your servant's fine. Here he didn't even speak. We don't know if it wasn't captured or what. So he's like, wow, that's just amazing. And the guys went back and then the servant was healed. Darla, we skipped to another story. Darla 11, there, bottom page 4. Okay. So he was in Capernaum, and now he's going to another city outside called Nain. They're not really exactly sure where that was. They think it was about 6 miles or so southwest of Nazareth. Nazareth is kind of north of Galilee, so it could have been they just kind of went straight west. Don't know exactly. One of the commentators said it was close to Mount, I'm going to say the wrong mountain. It's not Mount Hermon, that's over to the other side. I'm not sure exactly now. I can't remember which mountain it was, but it's a small mountain there that this city was at. And for whatever reason they were going, you got to understand the towns around there, they had to protect themselves. So almost all of them had walls, and they had gates that were in and out of the city. That's the way they got in and out. So as Jesus was approaching this city, the people were coming out. He had to wait, okay? Anyway, if he wanted to go into the city, he had to wait. And we don't know if he was going in or what exactly happened afterward, but at this particular time, they were having a funeral. And it said that they were carrying this man out. Yeah, it didn't say yet. And his mother was leading it. Usually they said at those times the remaining family was in front of the funeral procession. So that kind of lines up here. It says Jesus saw her, the Lord saw her, and had compassion upon her. I want to bring that out because this is one of the first times that Luke uses the word Lord. Normally he uses Jesus or the Son of Man or whatever, but here he used the word Lord. It's just something to note, okay? It's not used that much in some of the chapters and some of the books, but here he is. And he's telling the mother, don't weep. And she's like, don't weep? My son that was the caretaker of me and the breadwinner, he's gone. I don't have a thing. You know, I don't know how I'm going to live. I don't know. They're going to throw me out. I can't pay for my house. I can't do any of this stuff. But he told her, don't weep. Okay, Connie, the next one on page 5, 14 through 17.
Then he came and touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. And he said, young man, I say to you, arise. So he who was dead sat up and began to speak. And he presented him to his mother. Then fear came upon all, and they glorified God, saying, a great prophet has risen up among us, and God has visited his people. And this report about him went throughout all Judea and all the surrounding region.
Okay, so he had told the mother, don't worry, don't fret. And then he let her go by, and then the funeral procession continued. And they call it coffin here, but they said in the original it was more like a bier, I don't know how you say it, B-I-E-R, a funeral bar, I don't know how you say it. But anyway, it's just something they carry the body on, okay? And when somebody dies, they get them ready right then. And they're taken off to the funeral. They usually get them buried that first day or really quick afterwards. They don't let them wait because they don't embalm them the way we would think of today. Not like the Egyptians embalmed them, or not like anybody else embalmed them. So they would wrap them up, get them ready, and take them to the where they're going to place them, whether it's in a crypt or in a cave or wherever they've gone that they're going to appear. But here, he just touched the funeral procession, the coffin or the bier. Now, as soon as he did that, again, he would be unclean. Okay? Doesn't see a problem to him. It's not a problem. But people is like, I could just see him gasping right then, just, as he's touched that. And then he talks to the dead guy. How many times have you seen that? Young man, I say to you, arise. And he did. And those people scared themselves to death. It looks like the great fear came upon them. And he gave them to his mother. And that's why he told her, don't you fear, don't worry about it. And he came in. Now, did he die again? Yeah, he did. We don't know much about this story afterwards, but he died again. He was, I will say, resurrected, but he was actually restored, back to the way he was. It's not going to be like the resurrection when we get our resurrected body. He just got his normal body back. We don't know how long he had died. It'd probably been a few hours, maybe. They have to call, and it'll talk about here in a minute, I think, if you read down in the commentary. They say that even the poorest people should have 2 flutes and some other, maybe a harp or something it's not harp, but something to play for the funeral procession. Even the poorest of the poor. Others, you'd have a lot more. And then you have professional mourners if you can pay that much. They pay them to come and mourn, okay, as they're taking them out. So you can see all these people. Some of them had known this person. I'm sure in the small city they probably all knew him. But they really, well, it's a family. Yeah, so poor lady, I don't know what she's going to do now. Look at that guy sitting up. What's going on? You know? And it just scared them to death. So that's what, you know, and that's for us, we don't really see any more of the story. We don't hear any more about it. But it says on one or more occasions, Jesus broke up funeral processions by raising the dead. He did this for Jairus' daughter and Lazarus. The young man was not resurrected. Okay, I said it, resuscitated. That was the word. But he was resuscitated. He rose from the dead only to die again. And this is pretty funny. D.L. Moody said, Mr. Moody was asked to conduct a funeral service, so he decided to study the Gospels to find a funeral sermon delivered by Jesus. However, Moody searched in vain because every funeral Jesus attended, he broke up by raising the dead. At least the ones we know about. So he couldn't get that message. That didn't come across unless he twisted it like that, you know, to put that little note on it. Then the disciples of John, and this is John the Baptist, reported to him concerning all these things. And John, calling 2 of his disciples to him, sent them to Jesus, saying, Are you the coming one, or do we look for another? Now, where was John at this time? Do we know? He was in prison. He was in Herod's prison. He had called out Herod for marrying. Luke told us that earlier, okay, in a couple chapters ago, I think 2nd chapter. He'd called him out and he was imprisoned. So he was in Herod's prison. And we don't know how long a period of time this was, but John, he knew he was his cousin. He knew that he was special as far as, and not like our special, but he had the anointing on him. He knew that. He saw that at the baptism when he baptized him. But like anything else, with time goes by, John had a little different knowledge of a different thinking of what he thought the Messiah should be doing. So he thought he ought to be doing great and wonderful things, you know, starting to overthrow Rome, starting to do all these things that he's seen about in the previous Testament, in the Old Testament. So we see that even John was a little bit misled by reading the Old Testament and seeing what's happening, because Jesus wasn't going to overthrow the Roman government. That's what he tried to tell the people all through his life. He was trying to tell them, I came to fulfill the law, not to overthrow Rome. I'm going to do that. I'm going to overthrow humanity pretty soon. He's going to take it over. But that wasn't what he was thinking right then. So John was a little hesitant, maybe. He may have been a little discouraged. He'd been in jail. In our jail, and their jail is not. Our jail is like in a condo compared to what he was in. He was probably in a pit or in a basement somewhere, and leaky and muddy, and probably didn't get much food to eat or anything to drink. No sunlight and nothing, and probably didn't get many visitors either that we know of. So Herod just kept him there, and as we understand, he was just keeping him until he wanted him to let him get out. But it wasn't going to happen. We know that. So it appears to him that Christ was not doing what he should be doing. Okay, Brother Epperson, 20.
And when the men had come to him, they said, John the Baptist has sent us to you, saying, Are you the coming one, or do we look for another? And that very hour he cured many in blind he gave sight. Jesus answered and said to them, go and tell John the things that you have seen and heard, that the blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have the gospel preached to them, and blessed he who is not offended because of me.
Okay. Now, in just a minute, he's going to comment on John, but he says John was the greatest of the prophets. We see some of the prophets raised people from the dead. Some of the prophets did many miracles. Some of the prophets did things, but we got to remember it's been like 400 years since they've had a prophet. So John, being the prophet now as he was, he still didn't do all this stuff that we know of. I mean, it's not written down of him. He was preaching the coming of the anointed one. He's preaching the coming of the Son of God. So he said, some people, some of the commentators, they go back and they say, well, look at, that's a slap on the cheek to John's guys. Hey, look here, look what I'm doing. Don't you think I know what I'm doing? You know, but that's not really what he's saying. He's saying, look, just look for yourself. Tell John, he's in prison. He may be able to hear about this. He may not, but go tell John what's happening. These people are getting raised from the dead. People are blind or getting to see, lame or getting to walk, all the different things that Jesus was doing. And that's all he told them. He didn't tell an encouragement to John. You'll be okay, you know, I'll get you out of there in a little bit. He didn't say anything like that we know of. He just said, go tell him. And the only thing, blessed is he who is not offended because of me. Kind of telling John, you really don't know what's going on. you really don't know the whole story of what is happening. You know, don't get offended because I'm not doing what you think I ought to be doing. We get that way with God too. You know, why didn't you do it this way, God? I wanted it done. Well, it got done, didn't it? Or maybe it didn't. We don't sometimes have that right, but he does it in the way that needs to be done, whether it is done our way or done his way. We don't really know. It says it's remarkable that the same word is predicted of John the Baptist and Israel concerning their response to Jesus. Scandalized. In Luke 7:23, which we read, in Romans 11:9, Israel was scandalized by Jesus, and we must take Jesus seriously. That it was possible for his audience to be offended at his non-traditional role, even including John. Okay? Everybody thought they knew what the Messiah was going to be like. Going to be this king like David, riding in on a white horse, and he's going to take over. No, that's not what it's going to be. Okay, Tammy, 24.
When the messengers of John had departed, they began to speak to the multitude of the son of John. I want you to go out into the wilderness and see. A reed shaken by the wind. What did you go out to see? A man clothed in soft garments. Indeed, those who are gorgeously appealed, Harold, and live in luxury are in peace. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I say to you, and more than a prophet. He is the one of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way for you. For I say to you, among those born of women, there is not a greater prophet than John the Baptist, but he who is least of the kingdom of God is greater than he.
So he was talking to the people. The guys left, going back to John. So he's not really talking to them now. He's talking to the people. He's saying, well, you know, who do you expect? You had this wild-haired, woolly guy. He was a Nazarite, so he didn't cut his hair, didn't cut his eyebrows. Wild hair, you know. He wore goat skins, skins, ate locusts and honey. Who did you go out to see? But I mean, it sounds a lot like Elijah to me, the way that Elijah is described if you go back to read about him. But here he's telling him, who did you go out to see? He's not gorgeously apparelled. He didn't have nice clothes on. Those people stay in houses, stay in really nice places. He didn't. He was out on his own, out in the wilderness. He was preaching and teaching what God had told him to do. But among men, Jesus talking about that time, he was the greatest among the prophets. Think of all the prophets, Samuel, Nathan, all those prophets, Elijah, Elisha, all those all the way down. John was the greatest prophet, according to what Jesus said here. But he turned right around and he said, even the least that's in the kingdom of God is greater than he is. We have to, in this world, we have our opinions of people. Doesn't mean hell beans. We have to serve him and serve him with all we can. And hopefully, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that we can have that salvation, but we want to hold out our hope for him. So Jesus was letting them have it a little bit. I mean, not mean. He's just telling them, look, John was one of those that he was, everybody thought he was great in voice, and he was. Of all the prophets, he's greater. But he's nothing compared to what it is being the kingdom. Okay, Darla, 29 and 30 on page 10.
Now, people heard him, tax collectors justified God, having been baptized with the baptism of John. But the Pharisees and the lawyers rejected the word of God for themselves, not having been baptized.
So this is a reaction that they had when Jesus was talking to them, to his teachings. Even the tax collectors, the ones that the Jewish elite, was down on because they were helping the Romans. They'd been baptized of John. They thought highly of John. So that's why they went to go get baptized. They heard his message about, reconciling with God and the Father and the Lord. And they did that. But the Pharisees and the lawyers, the legal people, they rejected the will of God. That's what Jesus is telling them. They're off doing their own thing. They've got this legalism that they've set up, okay? And they're following it to the letter, even though, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, a lot of that was added on. It wasn't in Moses' laws that God gave him. So the Pharisees and them, they weren't baptized by John. They were rejecting him, essentially is what they're saying here. But the other people, the tax collectors, and you can include the sinners and all that goes with him, because that's when he went to Matthew's house. They had tax collectors and sinners and things like that there, and that's what he told them. The people that need a doctor aren't the whole ones, it's the ones that are sick. So that's why he told them that. Okay, Connie, 31 and 35.
And the Lord said, what then shall I liken the men of this generation, and what are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling one another, saying, we played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We mourned for you, and you did not weep. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton and a winebibber, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by all her children.
Okay. Now this is a little confusing if you don't know what they're talking about. Said this is probably alludes to some play or game among the Jewish children we don't really have a record of. But it's like saying, if you want to be the odd man out, come play with us. Let's go play. Let's do this. No, I don't want to do that. Come sing with us. Come do this. Whatever they bring up, no, they don't want to do that. That's what the Pharisees are like, okay? And then the Pharisees are saying, John the Baptist, he's one weirdo, he must have a demon. He's not eating bread or drinking wine, eating this locust and honey. And then this other dude that calls himself a son of man, he's just a wine bibber. He's the one that, he eats and does all that. He doesn't ever fast, all this stuff. And he's a friend of those tax collectors and the sinners. They go from one extreme to, they don't want to believe one or the other, okay? And that's what Jesus is trying to tell them. They're so focused, got their mind and their viewpoint on, I got to fulfill the law exactly as it is. If I step outside that law, I'll be wrong. Jesus is trying to tell them there's things the law was written because you need to understand it. And what Jesus did, he went and put it on our heart. Some interpretations of that law that we need to be a part of. But the Jewish people wasn't having any of that. I can view that point here. Today we'll make a law and we'll say, okay, it's good that we don't do this. Okay, then a little bit later on, well, okay, yeah, you can do that, but don't do this when you're doing that. The guys want to do it, so they want to do this instead of that. If you're doing this and doing that too, it's wrong. So they, and they just keep changing and changing or getting around what they originally put into place. I can see that today. We just keep building on those laws. That's why lawyers today, they have whole libraries of the laws. It's just amazing to me when Congress puts a bill forward. I don't know what it is in the House and the Senate here in Oklahoma, but a lot of times it's 1,000 pages. You know how long it takes you to read 1,000 pages? Most of them, and they don't have that much time to read through it. They don't know what it is. Make it simple, make it easy, and don't include everything with it. That's what they need to do. Anyway, I'm getting on something else. So, okay, we go forward. Verse 36. Then one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him. And he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to eat. And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought him an alabaster flask of fragrant oil and stood at his feet behind him, weeping. And she began to wash his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. And she kissed his feet and anointed them with fragrant oil. Okay, we see this a couple of times in the Gospels. This is what most people think. This was not Mary Magdalene or Mary of Bethany. There's a couple of instances where we see this and they mention a Mary. We don't know this lady's name. It's not told us here. It's not told us several things. We know Mary, whenever Mary Magdalene, if you go back and look at the times when it describes her, it usually says the one that had 7 demons in her. Okay? He didn't say anything about this. Said she was a sinner, is all it is. So we really don't have any evidence of this. So this Pharisee, and his name's Simon, I believe it tells us here, and he calls him Simon here in a little bit. He calls him to eat at his house. Come over to my house, I want to see you. This is, as we see, as we go through here, a little nefarious. He was doing this for a reason, okay? Trying to either gain some prestige, or I don't know exactly what it was, but we can see that the reasons behind him inviting Jesus was not to become a servant or to become a disciple. I'll say it that way. It was to try to maybe even catch him in a lie or catch him in something that he could, they could use against him. It says this tells us more than she was a sinner in the sense that all people are. She was particularly notorious sinner. Most suppose that she was a prostitute. It doesn't say that here, but her presence in the Pharisees' home showed courage and determination. Now that is something that would be surprising. And here again, it's not like our houses today where she'd have to open the door and come in. A lot of times they had an open air place that their house came in, and we'd call it maybe a porch even, and then it would come on into the house, and those, because of the area, and they opened all the windows because it's hot, keep everything in. It wasn't unusual for other people to come in and see. They had people coming in and serving them and doing things like this. So this other lady coming in wouldn't be so unusual, I guess, is what the commentators were saying. The commentator Trapp calls her a strumpet. Never heard of that before. A she-sinner or a hussy. That's what one we know. That's what he had called her. But it was bold for this lady to come into the house of a Pharisee because he would have called her out. But she was willing to do anything to express her love to Jesus. Now, because of this, of her doing this, we think that she had an encounter with Jesus before this. Either listened to one of his messages or heard him, out on that plane, or saw some of the miracles, and she was changed. She wanted to be changed. So she was doing this out of that respect. So she came to him and that brought an alabaster flask of oil. They said it may have not actually been of alabaster, but it was a small vial that had some perfume in it. It wasn't really an ointment, but it is an expensive gift. And they said that to use it, you would break the top of it. It'd be a kind of a container and then a real thin neck that would be sealed off, and they'd break it to open it up to use it. And they said it was something that a lot of the Jewish ladies wore a little around their neck to hold it there. I don't know if it leak out a little bit, or I don't know. But anyway, they said that they would even use it. Says Jewish ladies commonly wore that around their neck, and it was so much a part of them, they were allowed to wear it on the Sabbath. So evidently the Pharisees didn't have a problem with that, with wearing jewelry. Anyway. So we see that Jesus, her service to Jesus was personal. She did it all herself and to him. Notice how many times the pronoun occurs in our text. She used 3 times. Her is twice. She served Christ himself. It was neither the service to Peter, nor James, nor John, nor yet to the poor or sick of the city, but to the Master himself. And depend upon it, when our love is in active exercise, our piety will immediately be towards Christ. So he wasn't doing it to the disciples, she wasn't doing it in that way. And you may have heard this, but the way they eat, it's usually on a table, probably about this height, probably just a little bit higher than that, the table is. They lie on the floor, and they may have a bowl, a cushion or pillow or something. They raise up on their left arm, and the food's right there, and they just, eat. And they're laying basically like this, with their feet away from the table. All of them are. Is the way that they say that it would have been. So it'd be easy for her to come to his feet. They'd go around the table, he'd come to his feet. So we see a couple of things here. Let me get that scripture back. She was weeping. She stood behind him weeping. And because of that, her tears fell on his feet. So she began wiping them with her hair. us, it's like, okay, she must have had long hair. But in the presence of men, she was not supposed to uncover her hair, especially in presence of a rabbi. And she had to have done that then, okay, to clean his feet off. And then she anointed his feet, okay? Brother Epson, 39 through 40.
And when the Pharisees had invited him who saw this, he spoke to him, saying, this man, if he were a prophet, would know who and what manner of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answered and said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. So he said, Teacher, say.
Okay. Now, he said this to himself. That's what it says. If this guy would have known who she really is, you know, he's already unclean again because this woman touched him. See, 3 times in this story that we've seen this happen. I mean, in this chapter tonight, we've seen this happen. But he was thinking this. He didn't even say it. It says, but Jesus said, I got something to tell you. He goes, okay, let me have it. You know, he didn't say go on or anything like that. He just said, just say it. You know, what's on your mind? Okay, Tammy?
There was a certain creditor who had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. And when they had nothing with which to repay, he freely forgave them both. Tell me therefore which of them will love him more. Simon answered and said, I suppose the one whom he forgave more. And he said to him, you are rightly judged.
Okay. So in telling him right out front, here again, he tells him a parable. There's 2 guys. A denarius is a day's work, okay? A denarii. So one of them had 50 days of work that he owed his guys, owed this man. And another one had 500, 10 times what that is. That's a year and a half of work to pay his debt off. And the debtor, whoever he owed, forgave both of them. No problem. No questions asked. So Jesus is saying, which one do you think was the most ingratiated himself to him? And what did the Pharisees say? Well, I don't know. Maybe the guy that had the greater debt? Well, yeah. That's what you would think. But that it kind of, he's hesitating there. Kind of don't know what's going on. Said Simon seemed to hesitate in his response. He probably understood that Jesus had set a trap with this story. And he did. Darla, 44.
And he turned to the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house, and you gave me no water for my feet, but she has washed my feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hair of her head. You gave me no kiss, but this woman has not ceased to kiss my feet since the time I came in. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil. Therefore, I say to you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little.
Okay. So he kind of comes down on the Pharisee. I come in. You didn't offer me any water to even clean my feet when I come in the house. That's normal. The servants usually did it. They would take care of the people that come in. They'd wash their feet for them before they're getting ready to have, kind of refresh them. They'd greet them as we greet our neighbors, handshake them. And Jimmy kisses everybody. I don't go that far, but okay. But that was common back then, to give them a kiss, to welcome them into their home. He said, you brought me here, but you didn't really want me here, is kind of what he's saying. You wanted me to be here, but you're trying to show out or something. I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, what the Pharisee is trying to do. Jesus said, this lady wasn't invited. She did this to me. She washed my feet. She cleaned them off. She anointed them. You didn't give me any anointing for my head as I come in. You didn't give me any kisses.
You know, what love she had. She cried enough
Yeah.
and shed enough tears.
Mm-hmm. She washed his feet.
She washed his feet.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've cried a lot sometimes to get a few tears, but to get enough
Yeah.
to fall all that love that she had.
And that's why he said she loved much. And that's not, saying her former job. That's saying she loved him so much that she was caught by him, was captured by him. So he said she had a lot to forgive, to be forgiven of, and she's been forgiven. You've got a little be forgiven and you ain't getting none of it. He didn't say that, but that's basically what he was saying. Little is given. Then he turned around. Oh, I'll go ahead and let you finish that up, Connie. On page 17.
Then he said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." And those who sat at the table with him began to say to themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you, go in peace."
Okay. Now, she had already heard Jesus, like we said. We think this is what had happened and why she was there and why she was doing all this. But now he's just reinforcing that to her. Your sins that you've had, they're gone. You're forgiven. And go in peace. That means go on out and do good. He tells the harlot that's caught in the very act, go and sin no more. Okay? This is similar to that. Your faith has changed you. Okay, your faith in me. Now go and replicate what you've seen. Do that what you've seen and do that what you've done now. That's so hard for us to do sometimes.
I thought, one thought, your sins are paid here.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes
We forget it, yeah.
stumble over ourselves.
Yep. So the guys, they just went bananas. The Pharisees and stuff. Who do you think you are? And he just ignored them, just like, I've already told you who I am, basically. So her faith is the one that saved her. Go in peace. Said the woman came to Jesus in complete humility with the attitude that she was not worthy even to be in his presence. That was a good way for her to come to Jesus. But he did not want her to stay there. He raised her up, acknowledged her, loved her, forgave her sin, and sent her in peace. The word go was probably not welcome. She wanted to stay there. She liked being at the feet of Jesus. Yet Jesus sweetened the go by adding in peace. She could go in peace because she heard from Jesus that her faith had saved her. Okay. We can't do good unless we go. We got to go. That was a commandment that was given to us when he left this earth. Go ye into all the world. So he's telling her there, and he's telling us now, too. We got to go. Whatever we do, we got to go. So, I appreciate everybody coming out. Let me finish.